She was 7 years old. 7 years old, wearing her little Christmas sweater with the reindeer on the front, the one she'd picked out herself at Target 2 weeks before, because she said it made her look like a real holiday girl. She had spent the whole drive to my parents' house talking about Grandpa's house, about the Christmas tree, about the cookies my mom always made, about sitting at the big table with the whole family. She had never been more excited. And my father looked at her, this 7-year-old child, and grabbed her by the shoulder, yanked her out of that chair and said, "That seat is for my real grandkid. Get out." She hit the floor. The whole room went dead silent. My mom froze. My siblings stared at their plates. Nobody said a word, not one person. And I sat there, feeling something I had never felt before. Not rage, not tears, not the urge to scream or run or beg someone to do something. I felt clarity. For the first time in 35 years of living under the weight of this family's silence, I felt completely clear. I looked at my father. I looked at every person sitting at that table who had chosen to say nothing, and I said 4 words. Just 4. My mother dropped her wine glass, my father went pale, and Christmas in that house was never the same again. Stay with me, because this story isn't about revenge. It's about what happens when you finally stop shrinking yourself to make other people comfortable. It's about the moment you choose your child over your family's comfort, and it's about the people who showed up for us when it mattered most. My name is Caroline. I'm 35 years old. I live in Texas, and this is the story of the Christmas that changed everything. Before I go any further, if you have ever felt invisible in your own family, if you have ever kept the peace at the cost of your peace, please subscribe right now. Your support means everything, and it reminds me I'm not alone in this. Hit that subscribe button. This story is for every one of us who stayed silent too long. To understand what happened at that Christmas table, you have to understand what it was like to grow up as Caroline in my family. I was the middle child. There's my older brother Lincoln, the golden boy, the one who could do no wrong, the one my father coached in baseball and took fishing and bragged about to every person who would listen. And then there's my younger sister Maggie, the baby, the one who got away with everything, the one my mother protected like she was made of glass. And then there was me. I wasn't the athletic one. I wasn't the delicate one. I was the one who read books, who asked too many questions, who didn't fit neatly into the box my parents had built for what a daughter was supposed to be. My father, Wayne, was the kind of man who never said, "I love you," without a condition attached. He said things like, "I'd be proud of you if you just apply yourself." He said things like, "You're pretty enough, Caroline, but pretty doesn't last." My mother, Susan, was the keeper of the peace. Her whole life was about making sure Wayne was happy so the rest of us could survive. She learned to look away. She learned to stay quiet. She passed that lesson on to all of us. But here's what nobody tells you about growing up in a house like that. You start to believe you deserve it. You start to think the silence is normal. You think that love is something you earn, not something you're given. I carried that belief for 30 years. I carried it through high school, where I worked twice as hard as Lincoln for half the praise. I carried it through college in Austin, where I finally started to breathe for the first time. I carried it when I moved back to Texas, got a job I was proud of, and started building a life that was actually mine. And I carried it when I became a mother. My daughter's name is Lizzie. She came into my life in a way that I never expected and couldn't have planned. Her biological mother was a young woman who couldn't care for her, and when Lizzie was 18 months old, she came to me through foster care. I adopted her when she was 3. She has my last name. She has my heart. She is mine in every single way that matters. But in my father's eyes, she was never his. I knew that from the beginning. I'm not naive. Wayne had made comments before, small ones, the kind he could walk back if I pushed. "She's a sweet kid," he'd say with this pause that meant but. "It's not the same," he said once when I told him Lizzie had called him Grandpa for the first time. "It's not the same." I told myself it would get better, that he would come around, that once he really knew her, once he saw how funny she was, how kind, how much she loved him even though he gave her so little to love, he would stop seeing her as less. I was wrong. And the worst part, I kept bringing her back, Christmas after Christmas, birthday after birthday, Sunday dinner after Sunday dinner. I kept walking her through that front door and hoping this time would be different. Because that's what we do when we grow up in houses like mine. We keep hoping, we keep trying, we keep giving the people who hurt us another chance, because somewhere deep down we still believe that if we just love them hard enough, they'll finally love us right. This past Christmas was the last time I tried. It was December 23rd. My parents live about 40 minutes outside of San Antonio in the same house where I grew up, a big sprawling ranch-style home with a long driveway lined with cedar trees. In the weeks leading up to Christmas, my mom always went all out, wreaths on every window, a tree in the living room that touched the ceiling. The smell of her pecan pie drifting out to the driveway before you even got to the front door. I had dressed Lizzie in her reindeer sweater. She'd been singing Christmas songs the whole drive there. Her version of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, where she mixed up half the words, but sang it with complete confidence anyway. I kept looking at her in the rearview mirror, this bright, joyful little face, and I thought, this is going to be okay, it has to be. Everyone was already there when we arrived. Lincoln was there with his wife Elena and their 2 kids, Nathan, who's 10, and a baby girl they'd named Harold. My sister Maggie was there with her husband Gavin and their son Bobby, who's 9. My father's brother Roland was there with his girlfriend Miranda. My parents' neighbors Bill and Nicole had been invited, like every year, and my brother Lincoln's best friend Sam, practically family at this point, was sitting at the end of the table, already helping himself to the appetizers. It was a full house. Lizzie ran straight to Bobby the moment we walked in, because those two had always had a sweet friendship. They disappeared into the backyard to look for lizards, a Christmas tradition apparently. I helped my mom in the kitchen. We talked about nothing important, the pie crust, the weather, whether Roland's new girlfriend was going to last, normal things, safe things. Dinner was called around 6. Everyone started finding their seats. The table was beautiful. My mom had laid out the good china, the crystal glasses, the cloth napkins she saved for special occasions, candles flickering, a centerpiece she'd made herself with pine cones and ribbon. Lizzie came in from outside, cheeks pink from the cold, and made a beeline for the table. She found a spot right between Bobby and Nathan, the cousins she adored, and climbed up into the chair. She was beaming. "Mommy, look," she said, patting the seat. "I'm at the big table." I smiled. "I see you, baby." And that's when Wayne walked in. He stopped when he saw Lizzie in that chair. I watched his face. I watched the shift, the way his jaw set, the way his eyes went cold. He walked over to her. "That seat," he said, his voice low and hard, "is for my real grandkid." Lizzie looked up at him, confused. "Get out." And he grabbed her by the shoulder and pushed her. She slipped off the chair and hit the floor. The room went silent. I mean completely, utterly, horribly silent. Forks stopped moving. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. My mother's hand froze over the bread basket. Lizzie sat on the floor, looking up at her grandfather, and I watched her face do the thing that broke me. That thing children do when they don't understand why something painful is happening, when they're trying to decide if they should cry or pretend they're okay. That flickering, that confusion, that search for someone to tell them it's all right. She looked at me. And I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not shake. I felt something move through me like cold water. That clarity I mentioned at the beginning. Like everything slow and muddy suddenly became sharp. I got up from my chair. I walked over to Lizzie and I helped her up off the floor. I held her hand. I looked at my father. And I said 4 words. "We're leaving. Goodbye, Wayne." Not Dad, not Father, Wayne. My mother's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the hardwood floor. My father's face went white. Nobody said anything. Not Lincoln, not Maggie, not Sam, not Bill, not Nicole, not Roland, not Miranda. Not a single person at that table said one word. I picked up Lizzie, grabbed my purse from the counter, and I walked out of my parents' house. And I didn't look back. I need to pause here for just a moment. If you've made it this far, if any part of this story is hitting close to home, please subscribe. Please. Your support means everything, and it reminds me I'm not alone in this. I read every comment, every single one. And the fact that you're here, watching this, tells me that what happened in my family's house is not as rare as people want to believe. Subscribe, and let's keep walking through this together. I got Lizzie buckled into her car seat before I let myself feel anything. She was quiet. That was the worst part. Not the crying, not the tantrum, just the quiet. She sat there with her little hands folded in her lap, staring out the window at my parents' driveway. "Mommy," she said finally, "did I do something wrong?" I pulled out of the driveway. I waited until I was on the road before I answered her because I needed a second. I needed one single second to not fall apart. "No," I told her, "you did absolutely nothing wrong. Grandpa made a mistake, and we don't have to go back there." She was quiet again for a moment. "Is Grandpa still my grandpa?" I gripped the steering wheel. "The people who love you are your family," I said, "and the people who don't treat you right don't get to be." She thought about that for a while. Then she said, "Like how Miss Sachs at school is nicer to me than Tyler is, even though Tyler is in my class." I laughed, this wet, surprised laugh that I wasn't expecting. Exactly like that. We drove in silence for a few minutes, and then she said very quietly, "I'm glad we left." I almost had to pull over. My phone started ringing about 10 minutes into the drive. It was Maggie. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. Lincoln. Voicemail. Then my mother called, Susan, and I almost answered it, out of reflex, because that's what I'd been trained to do my whole life. Answer. Accommodate. Smooth things over. I let it ring. The one person whose name I was not expecting to see come up on my screen was James. James is my father's younger brother, Uncle James, who had been largely absent from our lives for years after a falling out with Wayne over something nobody ever fully explained to me. He and I had reconnected on social media a few years back, but we weren't close. I answered. "Caroline," he said, "I heard what happened. Roland called me." I said nothing. "I need you to know," James said, and his voice cracked, "that what Wayne did tonight was wrong. It was wrong, and I'm ashamed of him, and I'm sorry nobody at that table stood up." I sat with that for a moment. "Thank you," I said. That was all I could manage. "Your daughter is lucky to have you," he said. "I mean that." We talked for a few more minutes. He told me that the table had erupted after I left, that my mother had started crying, that Maggie had tried to defend my father, that Lincoln had sat there like a statue. That Nicole, Bill's wife, the neighbor, someone I'd known for 20 years but never been close with, had gotten up from the table and said out loud that what Wayne did was disgusting, and that she and Bill were leaving too. A neighbor, a woman who barely knew me, she stood up. When my own brother and sister did not. I thought about that the whole rest of the drive home. In the days that followed, my phone became a battlefield. My mother left me 11 voicemails in the first 48 hours. I know because I counted them. The first 3 were crying. The 4th was an apology, sort of. She said she was devastated by what happened and that she didn't know what came over Wayne. The 5th was a pivot. She said I needed to understand that Wayne was from a different time, that he didn't mean it the way it came out, that family was everything, and I needed to think about what I was doing. The 6th was Maggie, calling from my mother's phone, telling me I was being dramatic. I listened to all 11. Then I put my phone face down on the counter and didn't touch it for 3 days. Lincoln never called, not once. I think that hurt more than anything my father did, because Lincoln and I had always been close, or I thought we had. He was the one person in that family I believed would stand up when it mattered, and he sat there. He looked at his plate, and then he didn't call. On December 26th, I got a text from Elena, Lincoln's wife. It said, "I'm so sorry, Caroline. What happened was wrong. I've told Lincoln that. I don't know what else to say except that I see you, and Lizzie is a beautiful girl, and I'm sorry." It wasn't enough, but it was something. The person who showed up the most in the days after Christmas was someone I never expected. Sam. Sam had been Lincoln's best friend since high school. He was practically a fixture at every family event, the kind of guy who was always in the background, always cracking jokes, always the one bringing extra food to potlucks. I had always liked Sam but never thought much about him beyond that. He texted me the morning of December 24th. "Hey, I was there last night. I didn't say anything and I should have. I'm sorry. Is Lizzie okay?" I stared at that message for a long time. "She's okay," I wrote back. "She's resilient. Kids are." "She is," he said. "She gets it from her mom." Over the next few days, Sam and I texted back and forth, first about what happened, then about other things, about growing up in complicated families, about the moment you realize the story you told yourself about your childhood doesn't match the reality, about what it means to choose yourself when you've spent your whole life choosing everyone else. He was easy to talk to in a way I hadn't expected. He was honest. He didn't try to make excuses for Lincoln or for my father. He just listened. On New Year's Eve, he asked if Lizzie and I wanted to come to a small get-together at his place. Just a few friends, low-key, nothing big. He said, "You both deserve a good ending to this year." We went, and it was the best night I'd had in months. Lizzie fell asleep on the couch around 9 o'clock, wrapped in a blanket someone had brought, a little plastic crown slipping off her head from the countdown. And I sat there watching her and thinking, this is it. This is what I'm choosing. Not the table that hurt her. This. I thought about my father, alone in his big house with his pride and his definitions of what was real. I thought about my mother, preserving the peace in a house that had already broken. I thought about Lincoln, choosing silence because silence was safe. And I thought about Nicole, the neighbor who got up from a table that wasn't hers to leave, on principle, because what she saw was wrong. About James, who called from across the state to say, "I see you." About Sam, who said, "I should have spoken up," and didn't make excuses about why he hadn't. About Elena, who said, "I see you too." Family isn't always the people who share your blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up in the parking lot, the ones who call, the ones who make room for your kid on the couch on New Year's Eve. I have spent 35 years trying to earn my place at a table that was never truly set for me, and it took my 7-year-old daughter hitting the floor for me to finally understand. I don't need that table. I'll build my own. It's been a few months now since that Christmas. I have not been back to my parents' house. I have not spoken to my father. I answer my mother's calls occasionally, not because I've forgiven what happened, but because she is a complicated woman who did the best she could inside a life she was too afraid to change, and I still have love for her even inside my anger. Lincoln and I have had one conversation. It was stilted and uncomfortable, and ended with him saying he hoped we could move past this. I told him I wasn't interested in moving past anything. I was interested in moving through it. He didn't know what to do with that. Maggie is still mad at me, I think, for causing drama at Christmas. That's okay. Maggie and I have always spoken different languages. Lizzie is doing great. She started a new school program in January that she loves, something with art and music, and she has made 3 new friends whose names I now hear every single day. She talks about Christmas sometimes, but not in the way I feared. She processes things the way children do when you give them permission to, openly, and then she moves on. She asked me once, about a week after it happened, Mommy, does Grandpa Wayne still love me? I held her face in my hands. I don't know what's in Grandpa Wayne's heart, I told her honestly, but I know what's in mine, and you are my whole world. You are wanted, you are loved, and you will never, ever have to earn your seat at my table. She thought about it. Then she said, "Can we make pancakes?" I laughed for the first time in weeks. Yes, I said, we can absolutely make pancakes. That's the thing they don't tell you about quiet justice. It doesn't look like a courtroom scene. It doesn't look like a dramatic confrontation where someone finally admits they were wrong and begs for forgiveness. It doesn't look like the movie ending where the family comes together and everyone heals. Sometimes it looks like driving away from a house that hurt you and not going back. Sometimes it looks like 4 words. Sometimes it looks like pancakes on a Sunday morning, with the only person who matters, in a home where everyone has a seat at the table and nobody has to earn their place. Wayne still hasn't called. I don't expect him to. Men like my father rarely do the hard thing, rarely look at themselves and say, I was wrong and I need to fix it. It would require a kind of courage that silence never demands. But I've stopped waiting for his apology to give me permission to move forward. I've stopped needing his acknowledgement to know my own worth. That's the other thing about growing up trying to earn love. When you finally stop, there's a grief to it. You grieve the father you needed him to be. You grieve the childhood you deserved. You grieve all those years you spent making yourself smaller so he could feel bigger. I've been doing a lot of grieving lately. And it feels, somehow, like freedom. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. I want to close this video by talking directly to the person who needs to hear this most. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's someone you love. Maybe you recognized yourself somewhere in this story, in the silence at that table, in the weight of a family that taught you to keep the peace at the cost of your peace. I want to say this clearly. You don't have to keep going back to the table that hurts you. You don't have to keep walking your child into the house that diminishes her. You don't have to keep hoping that this Christmas will be different, that this birthday will finally be the one where they see you, where they choose you, where they say the thing they should have said 30 years ago. They might never say it. And your life, your beautiful, worthy, real life, cannot wait for them to come around. I am not telling you to cut people off without thought. I am not saying that families cannot heal or that people cannot change. I am saying that you are allowed to protect yourself and your children, while that healing may or may not happen. You are allowed to draw a line and mean it. You are allowed to leave. The 4 words I said to my father that night, "We're leaving. Goodbye, Wayne," were not the bravest thing I've ever done. The bravest thing was everything that came after. The not going back. The sitting with the grief of it. The choosing Lizzie over the approval of people who were never truly on my side. That's where the real work is. And if you're in the middle of that work right now, if you're in the parking lot, driving away from something that has hurt you for too long, not sure what comes next, I see you. I really do. You are not dramatic. You are not too sensitive. You are not making too big a deal of this. You are simply a person who finally decided they were worth protecting. And that is not drama. That is courage. My name is Caroline. I'm 35 years old. I live in Texas. I have a daughter named Lizzie who loves reindeer sweaters and lizard hunts and Sunday morning pancakes. And I am building a table where everyone belongs. I'll see you in the next one. If this story meant something to you, if it made you feel seen or helped you find words for something you've been carrying, please subscribe. It means more than I can say. Please subscribe. Your support means everything, and it reminds me I'm not alone in this. Share this video with someone who needs it. Leave a comment. Tell me your story. I read every single one. We are not alone in this. We never were.